Hi, it's Richard Anson here. I'm on my way to meet Simon Calver, the serial entrepreneur and investor. Simon merged two businesses together to create Love Film, which you may now know as Amazon Instant Video. I want to talk to him about how he built out the business and how he ultimately sold it to Amazon. I've heard he's even met Jeff Bezos himself, and I want to talk to him about that as well. Simon, a massive thanks for making the time.
Pleasure.
In my mind, you're one of the few people that's built a very large business and sold it to a large corporate such as Amazon. Could you give our listeners just a little bit of a précis of the journey you did when you built Love Film from the kind of start to the end, but just a little bit of a nutshell, and then maybe we can delve into parts of it.
Yeah, I think the first thing you experience is it never works out how you expect it to work out, both in terms of timeline and where you end up. So the journey takes many twists. But essentially, I came in, after Saul had founded Video Island, took over Video Island. We merged it with Love Film to create Love Film International. Grew that. Halfway through that journey, we acquired Amazon's customer base, so they became a shareholder.
Right.
And then, 2 or 3 years later on, we ultimately, exited, and Amazon bought 100% of the business.
Wow. Okay. Great. And how long was that whole end-to-end journey?
About 8 years.
8 years. Okay. And when you took over Video Island, what size was how many staff did it have there?
Probably about 30. Well, probably less than 30 staff.
30 staff. And when you sold
probably
it to
about
Amazon?
300 and something by the time we put it all together.
So you were growing at quite a rate.
Yeah, we some of the years we were growing at about 70 or 80%, year on year.
Wow, fantastic. And it's now the great thing. It must be great for you now. It's a household product that everyone's still using, right?
Yeah, but the name's gone, which is a shame.
Yeah,
but Amazon Prime is a reasonably successful brand. I think they've done an amazing job. But it's the infrastructure and support behind Prime Video, Prime Instant Video, and it means that more people are watching it, more people are viewing the films and getting on it. And there were huge, learnings about how we do that. But we'd reached, I think, towards the end of the journey, we knew that if we were going to compete in that on-demand video space, we would need, tens and tens of millions of pounds every year to invest speculatively in new content to create critical mass to get new customers on board. So it was going to become increasingly more difficult for us to compete.
Got it. The sort of things that Netflix are doing now, I guess, building out their own content. And what during that kind of growth phase, what were your biggest challenges? Because I think lots of entrepreneurs, obviously it's a very early stage, and then people talk about exit, but that scaling bit in the middle and growing is, I think, is a big challenge for people. So what are the things that you?
So the things we focused on, I mean, the first thing I did, I probably spent in my first year 30% of my time on recruitment of top talent. Okay. Right? So building the team around me. And if you think about 30%, that's like a day and a half a week that you were spending interviewing, getting out there, working with, reference checking, doing all those other things to get the best possible team that you could have. Both with William Reeve, Alex Chesterman, there were great people and great founders for part of the business that we then needed to pull together and scale up. So
it's an extraordinary set actually of management.
You had Simon Morris, you had William, you had Alex. Saul had clearly left, but Graham Bosher was one of the early people within Love Film that clearly he's gone on to great things. So it's sort of been a breeding ground of really great entrepreneurial talent as well, and the alumni is probably spread far and wide. And I think actually that is a great lesson for today's ecosystem, which is about people that have exits, successful exits, and experience, both positive and negative, bruises and scars, as well as other things, actually resharing, reinvesting in the next generation and passing the baton on, I think is critical.
And we're seeing more and more of that happening.
And I think that's what's fueling our tech ecosystem a lot at the moment. I think it started in London, but now we're beginning to see a similar thing in Manchester and Edinburgh and Birmingham and those places. And I think that's great for the UK.
And if you spend 30% of your time in kind of talent, I guess, recruitment and retention, and maybe we talk about that and the kind of, I guess, the management of that. Well, how did you spend the rest of your time as CEO then?
So one is you're looking for opportunities and partnerships. So one thing is as CEO that you can't do, and I think this is a challenge for a lot of founders that as the business scales, is what do you stop doing
Indeed.
rather than what do you do. And it's quite easy to become hooked on the heroin of decision making, right? Everybody's got to come to me to make a decision. Isn't it great? I feel great at the centre of what's going on.
And then you're just a big bottleneck.
And that's not scalable. So, what are the things we should be focusing on? How do we prioritize what we do? How can I help support, coach, mentor, whatever, the people within the team to be able to get where we're going?
Right.
And certainly in the early days, I had, this is just after post-merger, I had 4 VCs on the board as well.
Wow.
Right? So that took a bit of time.
Extraordinary,
So, one advice I would give to people is don't be afraid to get an independent chair in early, especially if you have a large number of investors, because there will inevitably be times where there are disagreements, or you just need air cover to get on running the business as opposed to managing the board. So that was, Charles Grasser was fantastic for me in that perspective.
And did he join post merger? Did he as well?
Yeah, just at the time that actually he joined just before we completed the Video Island Love Film deal. We sort of were looking around. And he came in at that stage and then helped us through that post-merger time.
And but I guess merging 2 businesses, how was that? And
they say that private to private is one of the hardest things to do, and you can understand why, because sometimes there's a lot of emotion that gets involved, and there isn't that screen of this is a rational thing to do and the market tells me it's the right thing to do, etc. So there's a guy called Adam Vulkin who was working with Thomas Hoag on the Love Film side.
Right.
Adam and I were sort of basically the principals who were pulling the deal together. We did a couple of things that I think was different and certainly innovative that I haven't seen before.
Right.
We appointed 1 set of advisors for both companies.
Wow.
The same advisors. So we didn't have that, sort of testosterone fueled debate with 2 sets of advisors working together. So that was, I think, one thing that made a big difference. We had our separate law firms, but other than that, we were then able to say we did a straight 50-50 merger.
Okay.
Right. We did some adjustment for net debt, but by the time we got there wasn't a lot of difference between the whole thing.
Right.
So it ended up being a how do we create value in the new business discussion rather than how do we share a smaller pie between us.
Got it. And when you were deciding kind of to, I guess, maybe during that dance phase of the merger, how much was sort of gut feel from yourself as the CEO and entrepreneur, and how much was down to, business planning and creating plans, etc.? What was the sort of how was the balance there?
Well, the story behind how it happened was not long after I got involved in Video Island. Danny Reimer introduced me to Reed Hastings.
Right.
So I flew over to the West Coast, met Reed Hastings of Netflix, and we sat down. He'd worked in education, I'd run an ed tech business, so we sort of got on really well together. And at the end of a bottle of wine or 2 and over dinner, I sort of said, so what are your plans for the future? Right? Clearly international is going to be part of it. And he essentially said, I'll wait to see in the UK and Europe what happens between Video Island and Love Film, and then I may end up doing something. So I had a 14-hour flight back.
Right. Time to think.
And I sort of put my thinking hat on, and literally I started to write the joint business plan on that flight back to say we should merge these 2 businesses. We're paying, PPC, we're paying more, we're probably paying more for acquisitions that we're doing. We've got 2 VC-backed businesses competing each other. Why don't we control our own destiny rather than slug it out together and then wait for somebody else to define our future? And I think that was the best thing that we ever did. So when I came back, Robin Klein introduced me to Thomas Hoag. We sat down with Thomas and we basically talked about the future of a combined business, got both boards together and said this is what it should look like and do. And it took us 3 months.
Yeah, it's pretty quick actually.
Which is relatively quick, but we got it over the line. We got through competition authorities and OFTs and all those other things relatively quickly at that stage. More on that a bit later. But that then I think set the parameters. Okay. I think what's really interesting from my perspective on that same trip, so this was quite an interesting trip in 2005, I popped in on the way back into Seattle and I met a guy called Jeff Blackburn who's the head of corporate development for Amazon. We had
was that just on a whim or just
an introduction again?
Okay.
That Danny set up. Met him, had a couple of beers, and it was then 7 years later that they finally did the deal, and actually 6 years later they did the deal and acquired 100% of the company.
Wow, so 6 years from first touch really to acquisition.
And I would advise people is build those relationships early. because certainly in an acquisition, it's not just about the company, it's not just about the product and the services, it's also about the people. And if there's trust, deeper relationships, long-term discussions, it's much easier to make happen.
And how much, well, I mean, also another question, you know, that first meeting with Corp Dev in Amazon, obviously, you meet Corp Dev and they're typically M&A people. Was your agenda and their agenda, do you think, just informal coffee at that stage, just finding out about each other's businesses, where you're heading?
It's just as simple as that. There was nothing on the agenda other than we should probably have a conversation. Amazon had their own DVD rental business, that they'd launched, so that was sort of beginning to gain momentum, and it's a question of let's get to know each other and think about what will come down the line. And then it was a few years later that we began to have discussions around, should Amazon get involved in our business more deeply? And then it ended up being that maybe we should acquire Amazon's customers and make them Love Film customers rather than the other way around. And what we had to prove at that stage is that we were as maniacal of the customer and we're passionate about customer service as Amazon and Jeff Bezos are, right? And once we were able to prove that, then we were actually able to complete a deal in terms of acquiring Amazon's business in. It gave us a good footprint in Germany and critical mass in Germany. We had
So you took in Amazon's customers onto your platform effectively?
Yes, and they became Love Film customers.
Wow, okay.
And we lost a very small percentage of them. Churn was incredibly low because of the effort we had put into, one, that process, but secondly, the service that we were providing to our existing customers.
So you had, well, actually, why don't we, let's cover it now, actually, while we're on the topic. So you had that, your first touch, and then actually there's then you had a commercial relationship with Amazon before then leading to
they then came onto the board.
Okay.
So they were on the board.
Right, so they then have an insider's look. One of the questions on that is when how much time when you were scaling the business did you and should CEOs, I guess, as a whole, spend on what I would describe as those partnership type conversations, which you don't know where they're quite going to go, versus building out your business, leading the team, etc. How much time did you spend?
I suppose it all depends on the quality of the team you had. I mean, if you think about some of the people we talked about earlier, they are exceptionally talented, great people that were just able to carry on running. If I think about Andrew Ground, who now has founded Tutor Fair, Simon Morris, who has a great track record, those were all people that we had together. Jim Buckle, who's now COO of Feel Unique. So, really, incredible team that were able to get on and do stuff. And that's why that 30% up front, you could say, wow, that's incredibly precious time early on. But it paid back in spades when we needed to sort of have capacity between ourselves as a team and tag team each other while we were thinking about some of those other things. Okay. I think the key thing is not to distract the organisation. I think having a single goal, single focus. In actual fact, one of my learnings would be that having a common enemy when you're a startup is really good.
And who was your Amazon your enemy?
No. So early on, it was Love Film Video Island.
Okay.
So when we got together, I described that year as sort of our sleeping with the enemy year.
That was quite a hard sell to the team.
I mean, it was such a logical thing to do. Everybody could really understand the benefit of that. So I think that was the first stage. Then it became Blockbuster. In our crosshairs, single-minded focus. What can we do? We offer a better experience. They had online, but it wasn't performing very well. They had that cannibalization challenge that you often get, and so they were doing really, really well. And we were, and ultimately we did better, and were able to significantly impact Blockbuster's business.
And then it became a cheer around the office, did it, when their final demise?
No, we're respectful. Respectful. Clearly. But and then the next question is, okay, who next? Where do we go next? As we started to do streaming, started to do online, then clearly companies like Sky, companies like Google and YouTube, they then became the competitive focus. So, how do we begin to push those forward? But at a time, if I remember, post-merger between Video Island and Love Film, where we sort of lost that, we're working together here now rather than against each other, we slowed down a bit. And then we were able to pick it up and reintroduce it.
Interesting. And you mentioned that kind of focus on the customer. Tell us about that. How maniacal were you about that focus on the consumer?
It was probably our most, sort of most important thing that we did. In reception, we scoreboarded customers. So whenever we had a customer issue, we would capture it and scoreboard it and root cause it to know which functional department had caused the problem, wrong promotional code, wrong disc in envelope, those types of things. And we scoreboard it in reception.
And not, so but not in a name and shame type way, or not?
No,
or
by function, by department. And
so,
what's happened with marketing, what's happened with production, etc. And then every Friday we would send out 5 positive customer experience and 5 negative customer experience. First thing in the morning on a Friday. And what was really interesting...
That was an email that went round to the business.
Everybody in the business. And it was amazed by how many negative experiences had happened that actually were resolved by the lunchtime on Friday, because somebody said, I fixed that bug that we had in X or Y. So it's real-time thinking.
And that's breeding a culture in the business of everyone absolutely caring about it, rather than just being a voice from the top.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that as a voice from the top, sometimes, as a sort of leader of a company, you sort of need to sort of play the, play the big boy card, which is to say, so one example would be, while we were merging some businesses in Scandinavia, we had a Scandinavian watchdog equivalent.
Yeah.
And what we discovered had happened is that we're internally focused, not externally focused, and we were making changes that were making the customer experience worse.
Right, okay.
So an edict went around the organisation to say, sorry guys, we can not do any more changes in the company that makes the customer experience worse. The only person that can sign it off was me. And it was much of a statement of intent, which is to say, come to me if you've got something that's going to make the customer experience worse.
Yeah.
The first week we had 2 or 3, the second week we had another couple, third week we had 1, and then we didn't really have any more after that. Because we found solutions that actually didn't make the customer experience worse. Because often, technical solution or, UI experience, the quickest one is something that makes it worse for the customer.
Yeah.
And we had to sort of get that. And we learned a lot from that. I mean, it was tough times. I remember we had the whole team together and they were playing the watchdog, and it hurt.
Yeah.
You think, that's your company, what can we do? But we learned from it and moved on.
Yeah, okay. And then everyone was responsible. Did you have a customer experience director, as some businesses do, or is that just under the COO as a whole?
Yeah, no, so under the COO, we looked after the various aspects of it, but I think we all own the customer metrics. So we all own churn rate, we all own customer satisfaction. One of the things we tried to do is to ensure that our net promoter score...
Okay, so you track net promoter score.
Yeah, net promoter score was higher for people that had an issue with us than for people who didn't have an issue. So that meant that our outbound customer service centre, our customer service call, were actually adding value to the customer and actually making them feel better about the company because we resolved the issue positively and well, quickly, and actually we got more endorsement and advocacy from that often than we did for people who didn't have an issue in the first place.
It's a great insight. It kind of builds on that bit about when people say if you can actually sort an unhappy customer, there'll be an advocate for life.
Yeah.
And on that, I mean, did you benchmark yourselves against other businesses with the net promoter score? I'm curious.
Yeah, we did. So there was the sort of WOW awards and network that so we were able to look at what other companies were doing and how we were doing.
Which verticals did you look at that you thought?
So there were a lot of early banking, companies that again weren't necessarily super high benchmarks.
Yeah. Okay.
But there were some of the e-commerce businesses, and indeed Amazon themselves, we would constantly benchmark ourselves, say, how can we get better, what can we do differently, and what can we change? And we went through a process internally of, Six Sigma black belt training just to try and get our processes nailed.
Right, okay.
Because we had to try and replicate this not only in the UK, but in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Germany, and scale all those businesses simultaneously.
Oh, that's interesting. You actually brought in the sort of Six Sigma training to improve.
to the individuals internally, so that we could begin to process, map, and change what we were looking at.
Great. And how about on the marketing front? Because you're obviously a B2C business. You've got built out a brand, and I'm sure our listeners will be very interested in how your marketing mix changed from the very early days when you didn't have much money to later on. And I think, when I speak to entrepreneurs out there, interesting in the B2B world, I think it's almost easier. It's almost a bit more mechanical in terms of the marketing automation. B2C is everyone's looking for the elevator up. How did you approach that in the very early days, and then
in the early days, one of the first things we focused on was cash conversion cycle.
Okay.
So if we could do pay for performance marketing, it meant that we had to have the performance results back before we were invoiced by people to pay their marketing.
So you took it one step further than just being ROI positive. You're actually being cash positive.
Cash flow positive, positive cash conversion cycle. And once we got the business into a positive cash conversion cycle, and remember that people are paying subscription fees, so you're getting those up front, then you're paying out wages at 30 days down the line. If you could do the same with marketing, you could actually get, and once you got a positive cash conversion cycle, you could put your foot to the floor and grow as quickly as you can, and you didn't see a huge drop in your working capital line, on your in the company. So that was once we'd fixed that, we then had a lot stibility.
And was there a particular area you fixed it in? Was it PPC ads or
so a lot of it was partnerships that we would do with people. So stickers on the front of Time Out, or deals with a Sainsbury's or a Tesco or somebody that we'd work with in order to sort of get performance-based space within media marketing. If you remember this time, this is 2006, 2007, there wasn't that much competition going on in that area. Pay-per-click was still relatively low, so sort of building that up over time, and the social side became important. I'll touch on that in a minute, because I think there's some really interesting learnings that we had there. But so that's what we started off with, that philosophy. Then the second thing that we did is we tested everything. So people say entrepreneurs and founders are are risk takers. The truth is they're not. Right? If you've got your business on the line, you are very risk averse, and you measure everything, you check everything, and you track everything. So we ran a small TV test in Scotland, and we knew that our acquisition cost, when our lifetime value of a customer was about 70 or 80 pounds. So if we could get an acquisition cost at that level or less, then it was worthwhile doing it, because we were building the the value within the business. We did a small test in Scotland, and it came out about £90 per acquisition. Just over. And we thought, okay, and then we changed some things. We changed day parts, we changed channels that we were looking in, and we went back to the business and we said, right, we're going to invest £2 million in a national TV campaign. We had £2.5 million in the bank. Now, that was a huge roll of the dice.
You had £2.5 million in the bank, and you were going to invest $2 million, so nearly all of it in a national TV campaign.
Now, the good thing is we'd had discussions with the VCs around the table and said, look, if this doesn't work, can we please have a gentleman's agreement that we're going to be able to sort it out? So you sort of cover your bases. But it was a big bet. And it was a big bet that paid off hugely. Our acquisition cost was lower than our lifetime value. But more importantly, Love Film as a brand began to become established in the consumer's mindset, in partners' mindset, via TV. Suddenly, quality of people that we were looking to, to come and work with us increased. The word and mouth factor began to increase quite significantly in terms of the advocates we were getting. So it sort of became a catalyst for growth. But again, before we did that, we tested and we did that.
And you can measure from TV, can you, the I guess, the cost of acquisition, near enough?
We built some quite sophisticated econometric models to try and understand how that works. So Andrew Ground, who was a chief commercial guy at that stage, very analytical, very commercial, built those models and was very successful.
So that gave you the confidence.
So the challenge is, especially in subscription businesses, is how can you find affordable, scalable channels to invest?
Absolutely.
And so we made TV suddenly affordable, and therefore it became scalable. Social, was an engine that we knew.
It's probably only just kicking off then, really, wasn't it?
It was. But what was interesting is that we did some analysis by postcode, and we looked at our household penetration, and we found out that if we could get to 2% household penetration in a postcode area, then we would see an acceleration of the rate of growth. So it was almost like the word of mouth, the viral effect would suddenly, we gain momentum. And so then our challenge became, in weaker postcodes, how could we get to that 2%, or how could we accelerate? So in some postcodes in London, we were 8 to 10% household penetration.
Wow. Did you do anything to fuel the word of mouth? And
we did. So a lot of social campaigns on Facebook and that activity. But the other things that we were doing is local based activity, door to door, shopping malls, shopping centres, all those other things that became really sort of important to just build the awareness. And in actual fact, we almost became the generic, DVD rental program that people could use.
Kind of first to mind, really.
Who signed up, and those red envelopes became synonymous with people who understood films and liked watching films, etc., on a regular basis.
Amazing story. And then just kind of turning towards the moving towards the exit or the sale. How did that conversation kind of come about, really? Was it just a natural evolution from having done that commercial partnership with Amazon? They're on the board at that stage.
I don't think there's, my experience is there's never a sort of a natural evolution to something. There tends to be a catalyst or a trigger point that causes it. One of our VCs wanted to sell some of its shares, had approached Amazon and said, would you be interested in buying that? Amazon, going through that internal thinking process, went through it and suddenly thought, well, actually, yeah, that's interesting, and probably if we're thinking about buying bits of it, why aren't we thinking about buying the whole lot? And I think that probably triggered the discussion that they had.
And did you feel you were in control of that conversation as CEO at that time? When
not really.
No, okay, no.
You got investors and shareholders, etc., speaking to each other, and and so. That again is where independent chair can help, right? Because which is calling people to order and getting everybody around the table to agree one plan. We had some amazing VCs who'd invested in the company, but again, getting alignment between 4 different VCs to 4 different objectives was a challenge, right? But we did get there, and then also remember we had Amazon on the board, so we had to sort of create a subgroup. And what we had done is we'd actually built a board to potentially float the business.
Right.
So we got in some independent non-exec directors, other than investor directors, some really great people that we brought on board, and that was always the plan. However, I suspected, and internally we suspected that to build a sustainable business that needed 50+ million a year to invest in content, we probably wouldn't make sense to be public. You couldn't be a 250 million pound business, raise 20 to 30% of your market cap every year to speculatively invest in content. That was going to be tough, right?
A tough sell. CEO.
And not one that the UK markets would sort of embrace. So an exit always made sense. And Amazon were clearly a preferred investor, knew us very well, had the relationship. And it made sense for them. And I think the catalyst for that was not only the selling of shares, but us really beginning to get traction in the streaming business and the online.
Right.
We separated a team internally initially to focus on that. We had a great outsourced partner in Pushbutton, and we built a team around really accelerating, getting the UI right. And a lot of the team who pulled together the early iPlayer for the BBC, and we just sort of built our expertise quickly, and then we were one of the first businesses, one of the first companies on the Xbox, the PS3, Sony TV, Samsung TV, and built momentum. And it was at that stage where we were, clearly gaining more traction, that it was much more appealing to Amazon.
And did you find that you had to go and find other buyers in the market, a set price or whatever else, or was it just naturally,
I think
agreed?
once we knew that we were in a sort of full formal process, then I think that we were able to speak to some other parties, who had some interest in what we were doing. What
would Amazon like to deal with as a business?
I mean, they are commercially very smart. They are very focused people. They know what they want and they know what they're prepared to pay for it. But it was still a 6 to 8 months process.
And that's a 6 to 8 month process from when you kind of both agreed that a sale might be a good idea. Is that the kind of
when you're having some in principle discussions.
Useful benchmark for listeners. And I guess I'm conscious of your time, but sort of final, I guess, did you sort of maybe more light-hearted side? Did you meet Jeff Bezos?
I did. We had an amazing
quite
meeting.
A lot of time with him. And
so I think one of the early things when the Ultimate sale came through was how passionate do we feel about the customer, right? And
from him,
because that's his focus. I learned a huge amount about how he structures his organisation, make decisions, and does that, but also he really focused on the out-of-the-box experience. So, why is the Kindle such a great thing to buy, and what does it look like? We wanted to be able to push a button and a video would play immediately that you took it out of the box as a, really, wow, this is something special. So that was really key. And he had an amazing philosophy and was, I think, to us, justified why Amazon were the perfect partner. And that was around, especially when it came to some big checks for content. It's sort of go big or go home time. And he said, let's go big. And and in relatively short meetings, he would agree to and support significant content development that helped, Love Film initially and Amazon more now, build an amazing content library to compete against Netflix.
It's amazing story, Simon. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
That's great.
Yeah,
really
great
enjoyed
to chat.
chatting.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye.